Welcome, welcome everyone. Happy Halloween, and thanks so much for joining us today for this really exciting conversation. We have attendees from both the public entity, the public servant side, as well as the supplier side joining us today. And I'm particularly pumped to bust some myths about buying and selling from state and local contracts. It's a topic that is less understood, but can have a really big impact for both public entities as well as suppliers. So on to introductions. I'm Marielle Reed. I'm the CEO and founder here at Pavilion. And at Pavilion, we are celebrating by dressing up as different types of searches that public servants have run on the platform. So I thought it was appropriate today to sport my refereeing and umpiring services outfit. And it's a good fit because we have an all-star lineup of panelists here with us today and a lot of ground to cover. So I'm going to be keeping time and making sure things go smoothly. So to kick us off, we're going to do a round of quick introductions, and I'll start with Maria Agrusa from Orange County, if you want to just quickly introduce yourself and share a bit about your background.
Sure. My name is Maria Agrusa. I'm the County Procurement Officer for Orange County, California. I oversee about 250 procurement professionals across 22 departments with a procurement spend of approximately $4 billion a year. I've been in this role for almost 4 years, but I've been with the county for 18 years this month. So been in Orange County procurement for quite some time. Prior to that, I was in aerospace for 7 years doing federal contracting. So over 25 years of government contracting experience.
Awesome. Megan, we'll kick it over to you.
Hello, I am Megan DeGrood. I am the purchasing manager for the city of Thornton. My resume is not as robust as Maria's. However, I did work for the University of Colorado for a bit, and I also did a lot of purchasing for the space program that they run there, so that's fun. But as I said, I'm currently the manager for the city of Thornton. So we have a team of 5 of us, and we buy everything under the sun you could think of. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Bob, over to you.
So to compliment Catwoman, I am Batman and the force for good. And I'm here. I'm the purchasing director for Broward County, Florida. We're down in the southern tip of Florida with Miami-Dade to my south and Palm Beach County to my north. I've been with the Commonwealth of Virginia for 20 plus years, and then state of Maryland for 5 years. I've done state procurement. I've been with Broward County for the last 3 years last month. And we've got an airport, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood Airport. We've got Port Everglades. We've got a seaport, one of the biggest petroleum cruise and container terminals here in South Florida. We've got a convention center hotel, and it's a very multifaceted operation. We're about $6 billion a year, and anything from traffic signals to buses to fire hydrants to water chemicals to airport runways, berths for the cruise ships. And we have a new Disney terminal here. So it's a great operation, very multifaceted, and it's an honor to be here with you, Mariel. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. And now kicking it over to the supplier side of things. Patrick, can you share a little bit about yourself and your background? Oh, Patrick, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that, everybody. Happy Halloween to everyone. Good morning and good afternoon to all. Patrick Rochon with ACO Engineered Systems. I'm a vice president on the government contracting side. Been with ACO for about 11 years and government space for about 16. We're a HVAC, mechanical, plumbing, and electrical supplier. So a full service provider. And I want to thank Mariel for the invite.
Awesome. And then I know Nikhil, unfortunately, from Kaizen Labs just messaged right before this and has had a family emergency. So he's going to hopefully be joining us, but midway through. And for those of you that don't know Kaizen, they are a company that creates digital services for residents to access local government services. So things like recreation management, city websites, resident permits. So coming from the civic tech space on the supplier side as well. And as I said, hopefully he'll join us shortly. All right, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm Marielle, CEO and founder of Pavilion, and I started Pavilion inspired and frustrated from my time with the city and county of San Francisco, where I worked in local government. And before that, I was an early employee at a tech startup that has since gone public. Fast forward to today, Pavilion is now the leading platform for thousands of public agencies to find and buy from suppliers who have been awarded cooperative, or we sometimes call them shareable contracts. And this umbrella of cooperative or shareable contracts refers not just to contracts from the national purchasing cooperatives, which many of you are quite familiar with, but also the state and local contracts that entities can utilize or piggyback on. And in fact, we have the largest repository of all of these contracts here at Pavilion. So for public entities, we're a free resource for you to get in touch with suppliers to make a compliant purchase faster. We can work with you to add your contracts to Pavilion, integrate Pavilion into your existing internet or web pages, and customize your compliance guardrails specifically to your entity, all for free. And then for suppliers, we get your business in front of public entities when they're deciding on a supplier to buy from and have a preference to do so through one of these cooperative contracts. So without having to go through a new bid or RFP process. It's free for suppliers to be listed on Pavilion and also to receive business. And we also have paid features and services that help you to increase your visibility and sell more through your existing contracts as well. So that's a bit of context. And as I said, I'll be roughing our time closely today since we have a lot of ground to cover. Here's our run of show. First, you're going to hear from public entity, the public entity side, these public procurement professionals, as well as suppliers around the growing importance of state and local contracts. And again, I might say buyer today. If you hear me say buyer, I'm not referring to a particular classification of public procurement professional, but rather anybody who is a public servant who happens to need to be purchasing or buying goods or services from the public entity side. So that can be a public procurement professional. Sometimes it's an end user sitting in a department as well. And I'll just use buyer as the catch-all term. And then we'll jump in and discuss how local entities are structuring their contracts so that other entities can use them more easily, and also how they're educating suppliers around these contracts to help them grow their business. And then finally, we're going to hear from suppliers about how they're promoting their state and local contracts to generate revenue and grow their business. So for public procurement professionals joining us, the webinar is also eligible for an hour of CPPO or CPPB certification credit. And yes, you will receive a recording and be able to share a recording of the webinar today, as well as slides, which we'll share again after the event. So that's our run of show. And before we jump in, we do have a short poll to get everybody warmed up a bit and see how people are currently using their state or local contracts. So if you're joining from a public entity, how often do you buy from state or local contracts created from your neighbors or maybe outside of your state? And if you're a supplier, how often do you find yourselves selling using your awarded state or local contracts if you have them? So we'll give you a couple of seconds here to go ahead and answer this question, and then we'll share out the results. So I see them coming in. So thanks to those who have already completed them. All right, looks like about half of participants, just over half of folks have answered. Great. All right, we'll give you 10 more seconds if you haven't answered yet and you want to chime in, go ahead and do so, and then we'll share the results with everyone so you can see. I love the couple of brave souls who have already answered. Wait, you can do that? Great. All right, well, we're gonna close that out, but it looks like overall we have some frequent users of state and local contracts. A couple almost never, about 10%, but it looks like vast majority of folks sometimes, often, or almost always utilize the state or local contracts, which is great to see. You know, there is this myth, I think, out there. We often hear it from the public agencies that we work with, and also from suppliers, of not being able, when you think about cooperative contracts, thinking about just national national cooperative contracts and being able to buy off of those. But in reality, entities can also buy through state and local contracts, provided that they meet compliance requirements. And in fact, what we're seeing at Pavilion is there's a growing preference to go local. But as always, you have to make sure that the contracts that you're using meet your compliance requirements. I know Bob can tell you a lot. We won't have time to get into it today, but about the intricacies of interacting with your legal teams to make sure that those compliance requirements are met. We'll cover some of those details. The point is, you're missing out if you're not incorporating state and local contracts into your buying or selling strategy. So we're going to unpack this a bit more. Most of you are familiar with cooperative procurement, but as a quick recap, this is when public entities purchase from a contract that another public entity has already created. And it's oftentimes a win-win for agencies and businesses alike, because agencies can procure what they need faster and oftentimes more efficiently, and suppliers get to sell without going through a lengthy competitive process, which also costs them administrative staff time and hard dollar costs. And we actually now have data to quantify these efficiencies too. So National Cooperative Purchasing Partners, NCPP, worked with nearly 40 entities to track administrative costs of running a bid or an RFP. Orange County and Maria's team was part of that work as well. And they found that the average cost of a complex RFP on the public agency side is about $17,000 in staff salary costs alone. So that's likely a floor, not a ceiling on cost, because it doesn't include the fully loaded costs of staff like benefits. We've also developed a procurement calculator with NCPP to quantify the cost of going out to bid or doing a new RFP versus piggybacking. And for those who are interested, we'll drop a link to that into the chat. Now, as I mentioned earlier, cooperative purchasing isn't just about the contracts from purchasing cooperatives or the federal government's GSA program. There's actually a huge range of state and local contracts that you can piggyback off of. And this is what we've seen people often overlook. In fact, entities are increasingly looking to go local. As I shared before, Pavilion's the largest platform for entities to find cooperative contracts. So we're in a pretty special position to share insights from all the activity we see on the platform. And I want to share just a bit about what we're seeing. So on the left shows the different types of active cooperative contracts that we have on the platform. These contracts from the cooperatives are represented in blue, and local entities are in green. And each of them constitute about 30% of the total contract volume that we have on the platform today. And the graph on the right side shows how frequently these groups or types of contracts are being viewed on Pavilion. So we see from the blue line that contracts from the co-ops, the national purchasing co-ops, are the most popular, but the local contracts are actually getting a lot of engagement too. And our buyers on the call will speak to this in a bit, but we see that the popularity of local contracts is driven by a couple of factors. First, we see that more and more local entities are including shareable or cooperative language in their contracts, which allows other entities to piggyback. And now these contracts are also easier to find through tools like Pavilion versus having to call your neighbors one by one and kind of play this game of Go Fish to track them down. So we're going to hear later from Maria about how she's spearheading efforts to share local contracts in the Southern California region as an example. And then second, we're seeing suppliers from different types of products and service categories get onto these local contracts. And that means that entities can actually buy more types of categories and from different kinds of suppliers, increasingly services and local suppliers on shareable contracts that weren't necessarily available before. We see lots of interest in piggybacking in areas where there are more shareable contracts available. So in states like Arizona, California, and Florida, local entities or purchasing alliances have added their contracts to Pavilion. And in these states, we see that engagement with those local contracts is on par with or even higher than contracts from the national cooperatives. So that's what the data says. And now I want to turn it over to the folks in the public sector who are actually doing this work on the call to hear about how you approach using state and local contracts. So how and when do you think about piggybacking off of a state or local contract? And are there particular categories you tend to piggyback off of local contracts for more than others? So I think, Megan, we'll turn it over to you because I know you thought a little bit about this.
Thank you. Yeah, so ultimately, it depends on the purchase a lot of times and what we're going to consider, whether we go out to bid or use a co-op. Terms and conditions and timing are typically the biggest factors. We use state of Colorado contracts quite frequently. It helps to save a lot of time. Essentially, a vendor who has reached agreement with the state has already agreed to the majority of our non-negotiable terms. So that helps when purchasing software. which can have difficult contract and timely contract negotiations. Another thing that we, when there's an expected level of service, we'll often look at local, regional, and state contracts because we want to work with suppliers who understand the nuances of being in the state of Colorado or in our region. Road materials is a good example of that. And we use a regional award for that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. Bob, over to you. What are some considerations in your experience?
I like what Megan said. It kind of depends, right? Depends on the commodity, the category, the timing that you have available. You know, certainly with the state, if you've already got those terms and conditions embedded in whatever contract you have, then it becomes a much shorter path and easier path to use a local or a state specific contract. We're going to have some examples later on of some things that we've done here in Broward County. But to your point, Mariel, about the local regional cooperative, for example, Port Everglades here is one of the largest petroleum fuel ports here in Florida. And so working with the local regional cooperative that we have here in Southeast Florida, we've been able to get quite a robust fuel contract, for example, with the fuel distributors. We've got the tank farms at the port. So that was a very easy one to do. It was done by one of our local cities here. I believe it was the city of Pompano. But it just depends. There's some contracts, and we can also use nonprofit contracts. And then you've got the Council of Government as well. So we're open to using many different contracts, but back to the lawyers, we got a legal sufficiency, et cetera, et cetera. And if we can get through that, we're certainly open to using it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I know for some things like water chemicals, there's a huge consortium here in the Bay Area of public agencies that use water chemicals, and they're able to get great pricing by pooling their purchasing power for those particular chemicals. So much so that I think there are a couple agencies in Southern California that wanted to leverage them, but it didn't make sense once you factor in shipping. So there are some of those things where like, hey, we could aggregate our purchasing power.
You bring up a good point in terms of those categories. For example, water chemicals. We found other commodities that are not conducive to do it. So we have to do it on our own because the cooperatives or the lead entity doing it on behalf of others has had a hard time getting their arms around the scope of a particular category. The one that comes to my mind here in Florida, we get a lot of hurricanes here. So we have what they call debris removal contracts. And that can sometimes be overwhelming for anybody to get that. And then when you have a debris removal company that has 50 different contracts, well, okay, which one are they going to give precedence to? And then trying to get on the demand side, everybody to agree on what that's going to look like. It's very hard. So that's a category that's hard to get to cooperatively or shareably, as you put it. So sometimes we have to do it on.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Maria, how about you? I know the perspective at Orange County has evolved here as well. How do you think about when to go out and use a national agreement or use a state or a local contract at the county?
I think my fellow speakers kind of covered the majority of them, but IT, commodity, we definitely, if we know that, maybe like a Microsoft or something is going to be a difficult negotiation with our council, terms and conditions are, we'll just go straight that route. We've also done it for maybe an industry where there's a lot of lobbying, could get politically sensitive by bidding it out, could, high risk of protest. We would like to be like, oh, it's not going to be worth it in the end. So that's another reason that we may consider it.
Yeah. Well, and I know particularly for Orange County, and we're going to talk about it later, you've also taken a role in creating a lot of contracts that your fellow agencies rely on as well. So I know we'll get into the details there. Before we move on to that side of things, I do want to just double click into just to make it more concrete for those who are participating today. Now that we've heard from each public entity around their piggybacking approach, I want to walk through a few examples around how you made that decision and the due diligence process that was involved, just to make things a little bit more concrete. So returning to you, Megan, let's walk through an example of a piggyback or two that you've made. And can you share, how did you decide to piggyback on a local contract, again, as opposed to other shareable contracts that were available? And what was the due diligence process that you had to go through in order to complete that piggyback process?
So I do have a couple of examples. The document destruction services, that is a service that most organization needs because we have certain retention periods of documents. And quite frankly, there's not a lot of players in the market regionally. It is a regional service that needs to be provided. So when we were considering the destruction and storage of documents, we had to factor in criminal justice records are involved in that process, which means whoever does this service has to adhere to the state of Colorado law. And since Denver had recently awarded an agreement, they sent us the document, and it was a contract in our state. It had very similar legal requirements to what Thornton would require. And it also contained piggyback language, which made the process quite easy on our side. We were able to draft up an agreement, which contained Thornton's language, but it all paralleled what was in Denver's agreement, and the scope of work and pricing all met our needs. So that was a process that was much faster and met our needs quite quickly than had we gone out to bid for that. The other one I want to talk about.
And
oh, go ahead.
actually, just before you do, I want to call out for those that might not have recognized, it sounded like you added an agreement or like updated the terms and conditions of the contract that you were referencing. And I just want to call out, we do see that happens sometimes when an agency is piggybacking on a state or another local entity contract, where they might create like a, sometimes it's called a participating addendum or some other agreement that kind of sits on top of the original contract that might include the terms and conditions. So thanks for sharing that, Megan. And I just wanted to add that quick voiceover for folks that are following along, just to call that out. So back to you with the other example.
Perfect, thank you. So the other example was actually a little bit similar in certain ways. However, we were trying to enter an agreement for medical grade oxygen. This was actually at the tail end of COVID, so there was a lot of demand for getting an agreement reached quickly. And essentially we reached an impasse with the vendor on the terms and conditions, and there was no movement at all. So I did some research on my side. I found a co-op award through the League of Oregon Cities. They emailed me all the information that they could about the RFP and the process. We did go through signed a master price agreement with the League of Oregon Cities, which actually allowed us to use their award, forego any negotiations directly with the vendor, and actually opened up a whole pool of other products that we could get outside of the medical grade oxygen. So that one was a really long struggle trying to reach an agreement, and essentially I don't know that it would have happened without being able to use the League of Oregon Cities. So that was definitely a win.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And again, I think really interesting example, because I do think oftentimes we see within a region, there's a lot of piggybacking because the terms and conditions are similar. You have confidence that the vendor can serve your area, but increasingly we're also seeing kind of these cross-border or cross-state agreements come into play, which we continue to be fascinated and excited about. So great to hear that worked out for you. Bob, over to you. I know Megan talked about some examples of piggybacking. Can you share a few examples of state or local piggybacks that the county has done, and walk us through how you went about deciding to use those contracts as opposed to other agreements or going out to bid on your own?
Sure, certainly. It's interesting to hear Megan address some of the same concerns that we have to go through in our due diligence, but to the extent that we had certain needs. I had a friend of mine one time, he said, well, everybody's heard of a BLT sandwich, right? Bacon, lettuce, tomato. But he said he used that as a aid to remind us of, instead of BLT, think of it as BLP. So there's a business component to the procurement. There's a legal component to the procurement. And then there's also a political piece to the component. And so understanding what is driving sort of the decision-making apparatus here within the jurisdiction helps us sort of navigate through selecting one source or another source. I mentioned fuel, for example. So it's all local here within South Florida. Made it very easy. Fuel's coming in through our port. So that was very easy. We can't buy the amount of fuel. I mean, it was almost $100 million, worth of fuel over many years. So we're not going to be able to leverage, ourselves. So if we can get the region to do it, it makes it better for everyone. Plus, we all share the same state statutes. So those are part of the agreement. We're all able to amend the contract with our own jurisdictional terms and conditions. So that was an easier reach. We're just not going to do that on our own. With regards to the furniture, we were already on a contract. I believe it was with the state of Utah through a NASPO contract or Value Point contract. And so the state of Florida had already participated on that agreement, and it was terming out. So the state of Florida then looked at the state of New York, and they had a contract with, I believe, 50 different vendors. And so being able to adapt ourselves through the state of Florida. So we almost had I would liken it to a participating addendum on top of a participating addendum to the underlying or underpinning agreement that the state of New York has. So then we had our own agreements with each one of those. And so leveraging scope, capacity, scalability with the furniture vendors through the state of New York contract, we can't do that on our own. And with regards to institutional furniture, office furniture, all the other types of furniture that we need, it was a much better business decision. We were able to get the legal sufficiency through that. And politically, because it is a state of Florida, it's not a difficult thing to do. Maybe a little bit harder. Like I said, we had the state of Utah contract before, so we can do it. We could use Maria's contract for furniture, but the further away you go, and the less you're able to incorporate some of your own local jurisdictional priorities into your contract. When you get into living wage and partnership, all the other socioeconomic factors, those are the primary reasons that drove us to these cooperatives or to these shareable contracts. And so that's just kind of the long and the short of that.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for walking us through it, Bob. And we know there's so much nuance, and you have to make legal counsel your best friends oftentimes to figure out
risk
how to
management, the commissioners. I mean, there's a lot of friends I have.
multiple friends, a whole network
But
of
when
friends.
they need something, you know who they call when they need help.
That's right.
Light goes up in the
definitely.
sky.
Yeah, or your cell phone goes off in the middle of the night. Yeah, either one. I want to call out again for folks that might be less familiar with the experience, just a couple of things about your experience that I think are really interesting and special. One is this nuance of leveraging state agreements, which actually behind the state agreement can sometimes be another agreement, or maybe that state is leveraging a different state's solicitation. So I think peeling back the onion there is really interesting of actually states have a lot of power to make contracts available to their local agencies, but actually oftentimes other local agencies outside of the state. So the example of, a public entity in Florida leveraging a Utah state agreement and the sort of stretchiness of those contracts, and then being able to access New York's contract through the state of Florida as kind of the broker or the person sanctioning.
Yeah, I'll tell you that I used to do this for 2 states for over 20 years. And this is like 3-dimensional chess here. Not only do you have the commissioners or any board or of supervisors or so forth, so you've got the local legislative body that's trying to accomplish all of the local efforts in terms of homelessness, affordable housing, all that rest of that. And, sometimes I used to think that, maybe procurement could solve world peace, world hunger, all the great problems of the world can be solved through procurement. But we happen to be a convenient vehicle by which to address many of the things that we want to do. At the state level, it's much simpler and easier because you're given the authority to do things. As long as you meet federal and state rules, you're good. At the local government level, again, it's 3-dimensional chess. You've got to navigate all those different areas there. And I think local government uh, well, they say the strongest steel is made in the hottest fire. And I think the procurement people that operate at the local level in order to accomplish the business, the legal, and the political pieces of a procurement, which is to get to a contract that accomplishes all of the different factors that any public governing body is trying to do. It's really amazing when it gets together, but you just have to wait a few minutes for it. And even if you're using a cooperative, you still have to apply the additional layers of rigor that you would do if you did it yourself.
Totally. Yeah, no, it's super complex. And I think that's one of the things that until you've been through it yourself trying to do the work, or you've navigated as a supplier, you don't necessarily understand, like, why is it so complicated? And it, like you said, it's kind of playing this multi-dimensional game of chess to satisfy all of these different requirements. So
And
thanks for sharing
advocating,
that.
you've got on the striped shirt. So advocating for the suppliers in this process is sort of an ombudsman type of a role that we have to take on to make sure that they're successful too, and they're not set up to fail.
No, and that's a great, I think, transition over. I want to pass the mic over to Patrick. Our audience now has heard the public procurement perspectives, of how public servants think through using state and local contracts. So I want to shift over to the supplier perspective and see, Patrick, how you think about leveraging your state and local contracts in your sales and marketing strategy. So I know you have a few of those, but would love to hear how your local contracts have helped you get inroads with other entities.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have national, we have state and local contracts that we like to leverage. Of course, the benefits are productivity of your sales folks rather than going through a lengthy bid process. So that has really helped us have some nice sticky relationships with the local agencies. But one example that I have is a current client of ours is City of Los Angeles, and City of Los Angeles, being the big entity it is, had a need for preventative maintenance on HVAC as well as repair. They found us through Pavilion, as well as piggybacking off of a local contract that was promoted through the County of Orange. So us being familiar already with the City of LA, this was able for us to streamline our procurement, the procurement with the City of LA with ACO that was already currently doing business with them through local contracts. So again, it's about developing relationships with the agencies and streamlining the productivity from the supplier side, from the sales folks. So that has really helped us. That answer your question?
Yeah, and no, it's great. I think again, I think that the high level message here on the supplier side is yes, it's awesome if you have national purchasing cooperative contracts. I think we understand the benefits in terms of time and cost savings of not having to, as a supplier, respond to a new bid or solicitation. From NIGP Business Council data, we saw that it can cost suppliers anywhere from $6,000 to $30,000 just to respond to a new solicitation or bid that you might not even win. So big cost savings when you can leverage a contract that you've been awarded. And what we oftentimes find is that there are suppliers that sometimes can't play or aren't eligible to really serve the entire country, but that have actually been awarded these contracts by a state or a local agency and don't understand the value of being able to really leverage them to grow their sales. And so we're always delighted on the Pavilion side when a public agency calls up a supplier that they found, and that supplier gets to win some new business. It's like a Christmas present, like, oh wow, I just got to close that deal and I didn't even know that I could. But there's oftentimes a bit of education that has to go in. Bob, did you have something to add? Oh, you're on mute.
Apologies. So I like what you said about Patrick's statement there about helping the suppliers. One of the things we try to do is when we know or learn of anyone that is going to be soliciting for a particular service, we try to embrace that and then put it into our own solicitation issuance. We use Bonfire here, which we have termed BPRO, Broward Procurement. And so we try to push those solicitations for particular services to our local vendors to talk to your point, Mariel, about growing, business. We try to reverse it too. So when we find out that some other entity is issuing something, we get in front of that, issue it to our own suppliers. So from an economic development perspective, it can help them, as well if they want to reach out.
Definitely. And I think that's actually a great segue over to some of the experience that Maria and her team at Orange County and the broader Southern California Procurement Alliance have been sort of leading the charge on as well. Just very briefly before we turn it over to Maria, I do want to just acknowledge, and I think for the sake of time, we'll kind of skip over here, but we could probably have a whole other session just on the compliance requirements. I think our panelists have actually already spoken to some of the considerations, making sure that the contract was created through a competitive process that satisfies your entity's requirements, making sure that it was created by a public entity. It sounds like, Bob, you guys can use nonprofits, which is great. And then checking the contract scope to make sure it covers what you need. But there are also some of these other requirements that aren't written that we know public procurement teams need to satisfy too. And Bob, you touched on a number of those with your BLT equivalent, for the public procurement side. So I think we've heard that piggybacking on state and local contracts is growing. There are more and more entities out there that are structuring their contracts in a way that makes it easier for other entities to piggyback. And Bob, you just touched on the benefits of helping your local suppliers actually win those kinds of contracts that they can use to sell more in their region and beyond. So I want to turn it over now to Maria, who's really leading the way in terms of helping entities in her region and beyond make use of Orange County's contracts. So Maria, can you share more about the formerly known as Orange County, but now Southern California Procurement Alliance and the efforts that you and your team have taken to help your awarded suppliers sell more through these shareable contracts?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to add to the previous conversation was I want to encourage people to request from the lead agency, possibly amending the contract, because we here at Orange County on our lead contracts, we're more than willing to amend our contracts if someone wants to piggyback and we're missing something. Someone asked us to add some survivability clauses just the other day, or expand the scope, and we're more than willing to do that. So sometimes when you're looking for a contract and maybe there's something holding you back from piggybacking on that contract, feel free to reach out to the entity and see if it's a possibility to amend to include what you need. So I just wanted to add that. Okay, so
awesome. Thank you.
So about 3 years ago, I was tasked post-COVID to create an alliance by my board of supervisors to look out to do a lot more regional collaboration, just due to all the impacts of not collaborating during COVID. So we reached out to our 22 departments within Orange County, as well as our 34 cities and special districts. And we came together as the OC Procurement Alliance. Our first task was, previously, I couldn't even share contracts amongst my 22 departments, let alone my 34 cities and special districts. So the first thing we had to do was try to develop some sort of platform to allow us to do that. So I met Marielle at a Capo conference, and we kind of sat down and mapped it all up. I told her what my very short-term needs were, and her and her awesome pavilion team were able to make that happen within a week, I think. So that was awesome. We kicked off our alliance. We're now up to, I forgot how many contracts we're sharing, Marielle. 3,000.
I think we're going to show it in a minute, actually.
Sorry, I don't mean to
Here we go. Yeah.
Definitely had to do some training internally, and had some work to do internally. We had to get our legal on board on expanding this program. We had to get everyone trained on standardizing across our 22 departments to include the language for piggybacking, to allow piggybacking, and across 250 buyers, it was quite a lift. We also had to do, once launched, we had to do a lot of outreach to the suppliers as well, because once we started adding piggybackable language, the suppliers were kind of hesitant. What does this mean? Am I forced to accept a contract if another entity wants to piggyback on it? Am I forced to provide the same pricing, so on and so forth? So there was a lot of education that happened. Also the benefits to the suppliers. We wanted to let them know, like, hey, by allowing this, you have access now to all of these entities and more. And we share our contracts not only on Pavilion, but We do a lot of supplier outreach. We have a supplier outreach event, monthly vendor information days. So it's really beneficial for the suppliers as well as the buyers. It's definitely a win-win situation. So like Marielle said, we started out as the OC Procurement Alliance, 22 departments, 34 cities and special districts. And we've gotten so much, I don't know, we've expanded. It's been so beneficial to so many
Interest, yeah.
so many across our region that we're now up to 80 entities across Southern California. So a lot of LA entities, San Bernardino, Riverside, all of the airports locally have joined the alliance. So it's been really great. We all come together, meet quarterly. We have events together, do outreach together. We attend each other's supplier events or city events. What am I looking for? Chamber of Commerce. That's what I was looking for. So it's been awesome. It's been really, really great.
Yeah, and let's go through some of the stats. I know, you know, we have some of them listed here, but we now have more than 2,400 active Orange County contracts on Pavilion. About half of them have shareable language, and they've been viewed, you know, thousands of times from 44 states. So I think one of the interesting things to call out here is, you know, you're serving your local community, and we've heard some of the benefits of collaborating regionally here. But we've also been sort of curious and excited to see that you know, public procurement professionals and users in different states as well are engaging with Orange County contracts in different categories too. So I think early innings, but really cool to see some of that progress. Maria, one question that often comes up is how a local supplier might be able to structure their contracts, but still account for some of the nuances in scope that other entities might need, or different distribution costs. So I know this is one factor, certainly at the national co-op contracting level, you definitely have to take into consideration, because the cost for a supplier responding who's going to potentially serve the entire country, you know, a really rural community that's doing a really small volume is going to have different costs on the supplier side than, you know, a huge agency like Orange County. So how are you helping educate your suppliers and helping them to make sure that their contracts are flexible enough to be used across both the county and your various departments, but also the broader region?
Yeah, that was a training for not only the suppliers, but my staff too in the county, right? So keep the scope general enough to allow for others to piggyback, and same with the suppliers. The suppliers, definitely one of the biggest concern was, you know, ensuring that they were able to renegotiate when piggybacking. So we let them know that yes, they are piggybacking on the terms and conditions, but pricing and shipping and the specifics, the scopes are always negotiable once you get into a piggybacking relationship with a new entity. So that is always one of the concerns that we have to kind of educate through, especially our local small businesses.
Yeah, I know there can sometimes be anxiety on behalf of the supplier that's been awarded a contract about, am I now obligated to serve all of these public entities at the same cost? Do I have to accept all of the business? And so I think part of the education too has been saying, no, this provides you the opportunity to do so. And that education component, like you said, about thinking about your business or your response, not just for this one very specific project, but actually how do you think about your costs for the business, and how might those apply to entities of different sizes or different with slightly different needs. So here's a screenshot I know of some of the way that you know, one contract from the Orange County that Orange County awarded is structured, and you can see that the supplier has responded with an hourly rate range, which gives them some flexibility within the region to provide different costs to different entities depending on the needs. Maria, I'd love to now have you speak to some of the successes that you've seen in terms of helping your suppliers grow their business and some of the piggybacks that you have generated for those suppliers that have been awarded. So we have a couple of examples up here, but would love it if you can just kind of speak to some of those.
Yeah. The EMS training. Let's see. EMS training. I'm not extremely familiar with these. I think the business intelligence is Procure America.
That's right. Yeah, actually, I think we can double click into. I can double click. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you play slide the roulette here. The business intelligence services is Procure America, and it looks like I think we've seen that that's been piggybacked by City of San Ramon, City of Oxnard, UC Merced, Midway City Sanitation District, City of Huntington Beach. So just a whole handful of entities in the region that have leveraged that contract. I think, let's see, the Surplus Asset Sales and Marketing Services, I think was Liquidity Services Operations LLC. And again, a handful of entities in the region. And I think the EMS training was Protech EMS or Marvin Bradley Wilder. And that was by the city of San Diego. So other large cities also leveraging the county contract. So not just small. I think a lot of times folks think, oh, central county, really small cities, kind of like the example, Megan, you shared of like, hey, really big city and county of Denver, and then the sort of satellite of metros or school districts or others that can piggyback. But I think what we're also seeing is actually sometimes there's, pretty large entities sharing with each other within a region or beyond as well.
And GovDeals, I think GovDeals is the second bullet. We just had another piggyback from City of Anaheim yesterday. We've got a great partnership with them where we have kind of calls with the supplier and the interested entity with our organization just to kind of walk them through how it'll all work. So we're doing a lot of engagement. And I know with Procure America, the business intelligence services, we show 8 piggybacks, but that is just prior to our alliance kicking off. I think they are up to like 19 piggybacks on our original contract total. And they're so grateful for Pavilion because they had to kind of market it on their own previously and let them know to reach out to us. And now they can just send them to Pavilion and they can go get everything they need without even reaching out to us. So I know that their entities have really benefited from that.
Yeah, great. So I know we're coming up on time. We have a lot of questions, so I'm going to keep us moving here. And one point I did want to touch on is we mentioned that one of the requirements to make local contracts available for piggybacking is to have shareable language in them. And I think a few of our panelists have touched on this as well. And so I just want to flag, these are some examples. Here's language from Orange County, from Thornton, and also from SAVE, which is a group in the Arizona metro region, which I know Kaizen Labs actually is an awarded vendor there, and it's started to see some utilization of their contract across that network and actually outside of the state of Arizona as well. So these are some examples. We do as Pavilion have other examples that we've collected from entities that we work with across the country. So if you're working on language, either as a public entity and you're like, okay, how do we actually make more of our contracts available for sharing with our peer public entities, and you want to see some of those examples, or you're a supplier who's looking for this language, maybe you're doing an audit on your current contracts to see, have we been awarded one of these? We're happy to share that language, so please reach out. So we've covered the contract structure itself and how suppliers are getting onto these contracts. And for suppliers to grow their business with these local contracts, they have to go about educating their teams and really promoting them in their collateral or their conversations. And that's one of the biggest pitfalls that we hear about suppliers is even if they're aware of them, they've won one of these shareable contracts, they're not able to actively promote them. The contracts are effectively gathering dust on a digital or physical shelf somewhere. So challenges on the supplier side and on the education of suppliers side can oftentimes be that sales teams don't know when or how to use contracts. That's especially a problem if the company holds many different cooperative contracts, or if the company has just been awarded maybe a local contract for the first time. Marketing teams often aren't aware of these contracts or highlighting them on the company's website or on their collateral or in field marketing events. And then also, if suppliers have multiple product lines or services, their existing customers may not know that they can actually use those contracts to buy other things that supplier might offer if they're in scope of contract. So if you're a supplier, you've invested time and resources in getting onto these contracts and being awarded, the last thing you want to do is miss out on opportunities to be more visible and capture interest. So I think, Patrick, I'd love to hear from you. What have been some of the challenges that you've been having in terms of maximizing the value of your cooperative contracts, and especially the state and local ones? And what are some tactics that you're employing really to address those challenges?
Well, yeah, you hit it on the nail. All three of these topics here, the sales training, marketing, and obviously customers not knowing about these contracts, are the biggest challenges being from the supplier side. Just knowing how they work has been an extreme challenge, but one couple of things that we're doing is obviously implementing sales training for the sales folks that are really engaged in government contracting from a local all the way to a national level, and how they work, and then asking the right questions so that the agencies we're working with know about these contracts and what they can do to utilize them. Some things from the marketing perspective that we are now doing is email blasting for, you know, certain market segments that we're going after or want to have relationships with, alongside with referrals. And then thankful from Pavilion side, where now agencies can go direct to a link website that can provide the contracts that of a need that they're specifically looking for. So those are some things that we're doing to attack some of the pitfalls that entail cooperative purchasing from a supplier side that has really helped expand our business from a product side as well as geography.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. And you spoke about your experience getting your foot in the door with new entities using your Orange County awarded contract earlier, which is awesome. Can you speak to how Pavilion is helping you leverage that contract and others in your portfolio to generate new business?
Yeah, absolutely. So that other example that I provided was the city of LA, which is a local based contract off of the county of Orange. So thank you to Maria and her team for helping assist with that. But really leveraging Pavilion into geography expansion has helped us into the state of Arizona with new opportunities, as well as the state of Texas, hopefully to branch into the state of Colorado. So really as an expansion piece for us, geography-wise, where the relationships that we don't have today can be accessible, that has generated some opportunities for us based on the needs and the things that we provide in our contracts. So that's where I want to thank, obviously, Pavilion team putting this together, because that platform wasn't available at a certain time frame. So.
Yeah, and I think if it's okay with you, Patrick, I think one of the things that I was excited about with that example was you mentioned City of LA was kind of an existing customer, you had a relationship, but actually the department or the user that had the need for the service was one that you hadn't been in touch with before. So I think for suppliers, there can be focus on getting kind of net new business from new agencies that you've never worked with, but there are also opportunities to leverage the contracts that you've been awarded to expand your footprint or grow your business with new users in some of these public entities as well that might be less familiar with your business. So that's super exciting. Patrick mentioned that Pavilion's playing a role in how they're maximizing contract portfolio to grow their business. And I recognize that not everyone on this call knows how we work. So I just want to share, typically when we speak to suppliers, their public sector go-to-market strategy looks something like this. On the awareness side, they're using sales and marketing outbound conferences to build their presence. But it's actually much more valuable for suppliers to get in front of entities when there's purchase intent, meaning that those entities are actively in the market looking to buy. They have the need. They're kind of raising their hand saying, hey, I have this need right now. And businesses tend to have strategies in place to find new bid or RFP opportunities, get notified, hey, a solicitation is going to hit the street soon. But they don't have tools or strategies for ensuring that they're being considered right when the entity is looking to purchase through a cooperative contract. So that's that second pathway. So that's where Pavilion comes into play. We're the only channel out there that really gets suppliers in front of entities when they're actively deciding on who to buy from, and they have a preference to utilize a national purchasing cooperative contract or some other shareable contract. So Pavilion kind of plays the matchmaker when it comes to connecting entities and suppliers that can serve them through those contracts. And Patrick mentioned how I think it was the city of LA found their OC contract through Pavilion, and I just want to take you quickly through what that looks like. So I think shifting over, here we are as a local entity in California. We can go ahead and enter our search. And thanks to my team who's writing this quickly out. I can type in what I need. I'm not sure who I'm going to work with yet, and we can see that that the contracts show up here. I can go ahead and click into those details around the contract. I can view the contract documents, and I can actually go ahead and get in touch. In this case, it would be with Patrick. I can see all the contract documents from the Orange County Award, do my due diligence much faster, and as I said, reach out and go ahead and connect with, in this case, Patrick. So that's how we play matchmaker here. And again, we're helping public entity buyers who have a need and a preference to purchase cooperatively find suppliers and contracts they can use, and helping businesses generate over $1 billion in sales every year through those contracts. So Businesses are using us to extend their reach, win new customers, you know, we're really excited about that momentum. And we've also helped businesses generate more revenue from their existing customers. For instance, we helped an IT consulting firm, a project where they already had a relationship with the city's department, but that, you know, they had no idea that the company could actually implement the type of software that they were looking to roll out. So this expansion advantage is one that we've seen a couple of times. As a reminder, it's free for public servants always on the Pavilion side, and it's also free for suppliers to be listed and to receive business through Pavilion. If you want to grow your sales on cooperative contracts even more, we also have paid features. So please get in touch if you'd like to learn more about those. And then as we wrap up, there are really three things that I want to make sure you're taking away from our session today. First, public entities are increasingly looking to piggyback off of contracts, including national purchasing cooperative contracts and also state and local agreements. And then second, for public entity buyers, when you're looking to piggyback off a local contract, you got to still make sure you're checking the box on compliance requirements and the practical realities of whether or not the supplier can realistically meet your needs. For instance, serve your area. So just because a roofer in Florida has a contract you can use doesn't mean that they can truly build your roof in Colorado, for example. And then finally, for suppliers, make sure you're promoting your state and local contracts and using them to grow your business, and Pavilion can help. So we're going to open it up to questions. I know we have a couple minutes here. Before we do, my team's going to post a feedback survey. So please just take a couple of seconds to fill out those few questions. It truly helps us continue to improve and iterate on the kind of content that we're creating and hopefully drive more value to you as public servants and suppliers. So the link is right there. And then I also want to share my contact information here as well. So if you have any questions from today's presentation that we don't get to, or if you'd like more information about how you can use Pavilion to support your public agency or your business, please send me a note and I'd be happy to connect. So with that, want to turn it over. We have some questions here. So I think one of them was around understanding, and I think Megan might have answered a couple of them. Let's see. And thank you for doing that. So yeah, understanding language to put in a procurement policy to address participating addendums. So it looks like, is there boilerplate language to put in a procurement policy to address participating addendums? And it looks like there's a new regional alliance, yay, being created by our county. Is there a benefit to being part of the alliance governing group rather than just a participant? So it looks like two questions there. One on boilerplate language around procurement policy, around how do you handle participating addendums? Like, do you have to put one into place? Is it kind of a case-by-case thing? And then I think the second question, probably over to you, Maria, of like, if a new regional group or alliance is being created, should I participate or should I actually join the governing group? What are some of the advantages? So maybe we'll tackle that boilerplate language question first. Anyone have experience that you want to share? If not, maybe we can handle that one async. And Maria, you can jump in and talk about the alliance governing board versus participant.
Sure, we don't utilize participating addendums, so I don't have any feedback there, but I highly encourage you being part of the alliance because you're kind of driving the direction of the alliance. You also have a lot more say-so in what contracts may be established, you know, and where to kind of take the alliance and take where this piggybacking relationship is going. So I highly recommend it. We all share information to best practices at our quarterly meetings. We take advantage of each other's resources, trainings, terms and conditions, or sometimes, you know, we have a lot of legislation, state legislation going on right now, a lot of new directives. So we're able to tackle that together as a region. So highly recommend. There's a lot of benefits to being part of the actual alliance. I mean, I think just it's just a side benefit. The piggybacking is one of the many benefits, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I know we're at time and I'm grateful to our panelists who did take some time to answer questions that have come in. I know I saw some coming in through the chat and was pleasantly surprised to see Bob, Megan, many of you had already answered those questions. So thank you so much for doing that. I know we didn't get to every one of them. So if you still have them, please do reach out and send a note and we can help triage some of those questions across our panelists as well. Thank you all, especially our panelists for joining the conversation today. And for those who joined us virtually, we really appreciate your time and hope the session was useful to you. And we hope you have a great and very happy Halloween as well. So we look forward to seeing you for the next conversation. Thanks again.
Thank you.